All right, it looks like we're about 10:05, so I will probably get going. I'm going to start by introducing myself, and then I will go over and begin sharing. As I said before, this class is a little more disorganized than I would like it to be because I did not finish the translation as early as I wanted. And so we'll be talking about the play, the Due Cortigiane. You did not expect the cheese inquisition. No one expects dairy to be inquisite. Okay, so
I'm actually going to make just a quick announcement that the class is being recorded, so please keep your microphone muted unless you're asking a question or chiming in. And mods, hosts, and teachers have the right to ban anyone at any time for any reason. All right.
Alrighty. Hello, I'm Praxilla Taurina. I live in the Kingdom of Artemisia. Everyone just calls me Prax. It's pretty standard that way because no one ever goes into my full name, so it's rare you'll see that. I have a probably unhealthy fixation with the 16th century Venetian printing industry and all that is involved in that. And thus I came upon a comedy called the Due Cortigiane, and was interested in that and interested in the give and take of the characters, playing with some of the language. Unfortunately, Italian is, I barely scrape by. So I've done a little bit of the translation on it, but I have not done a complete translation on it. And so we're going to talk about more of the cultural surroundings, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the language, but not nearly as much as I intended. It's been a kind of a busy month, and so translation did not happen quite as well as I'd like. As I go along, please feel free to either ask questions in the chat or unmute yourself if you'd rather, and we can talk about that. If I go off in super crazy direction, somebody please, wave me down and say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Come back, come back, come back, come back, come back. But we are going to be talking about Lodovico Domenichi and his play, the Two Courtesans, which is actually, all right. Alrighty, we're talking about the sweet little words, the dolci paroline. Well, as I said before, this is going to be probably more cultural framing than the specifics of this one particular play, just because of how things went. So hopefully that'll work. Okay, so we'll be talking about the polymath Lodovico Domenichi. His dates are 1515 to 1564. He was a historian, a translator. He did a lot of translation of Plutarch and Livy and about a variety of works. There's some question of how much of his work is his own work and how much of it is plagiarized. The way the 16th century Venetian industry worked was in order to have copyright or privilegio, what you did was you applied to the Senate and they gave you a 10-year privilege in order to you be the only person to translate or publish a particular work. But a huge preponderance of things never received privilegio. They did not go through the Senate. They were not actually under any sort of copyright. So there is rampant republication of things. And some of those are good and some of those are bad and some of those are cooperative with, hey, my buddy over here is going to republish that and others of those were, hey, I paid for that, and now I don't get to publish it. So it's a give and take. The industry was really huge, actually. About in 16th century Venice, there were Venice alone, well, Italy, 1,300 publishers, and about a third of those were in the city of Venice. So publishing huge amounts of things. It just was gargantuan with what was being put out. Early on, Ludovico, he was well educated. He was the son of a lawyer. He met and studied with Alciato. He basically worshipped at the ground that Piero Artino walked on early on, which is important because we're going to talk about a transformation a little bit further on. If anyone is familiar with, well, people should be familiar with Artino. He was really down on courtesans. We have one of the best known pieces written about courtesans is a play by Artino, and it is a sarcastic and facetious dialogue between two rather, well, totally mercenary women, and that's kind of pushed forward as the ideal. And it is important that Domenichi was really following Artino early on because of that misogyny, and we know that he's coming from that place. And it's not misogyny in his own view, because the 16th century Italy, the view of women is not real high. We're going to talk about that a little bit further on, but just letting everyone know that early on, Domenichi thought that Artino walked on water. He thought he was amazing. He studied as a lawyer. Lawyering didn't stick, so he joined salon culture. He was living in Piacenza early on, and he became part of the Accademia degli Ortolani, which this is an interesting academy. This is an interesting salon because it's sort of a joke. It's sort of a joke academy. It's well known for being a bunch of guys just getting together with wine, women, and song. But Domenichi also points out that philosophy, logic, rhetoric, Latin, and Tuscan poetry were read there and were very hard labors, and they appeared in both languages, and we totally studied, I swear. But this particular Accademia existed between 1543 and 1545, and then it broke up. It broke up for political reasons. People were getting in trouble, really big trouble with the Inquisition, various other political problems. But in the year 1543, the Academy went under the tutelage of the god of the Horti, Priapus. Again, just to tell you what these guys were thinking. They decided, we are going to study under Priapus this year. He is totally our patron saint. So again, wine, women, and song, specifically mentioned as wine, women, and song. They referred to themselves as the market gardeners, and they gave themselves nicknames. They went by nicknames like the onion, the leek, the watermelon, the citriolo, the cardo, the carrot, semenza, or the gifts, cucumber. So they were known as many of these rather phallic vegetables, and that's what they called themselves. Other salons are taking historical Roman names in order to give themselves sort of some extra dignity. These guys are naming themselves after vegetables, and their motto was, "If the humor does not fail." So, like I said, it's sort of a joke It's a lot of a joke. But there are interesting pieces of publication coming out of this. But this is where Domenichi is starting out. Okay, so as I said before, in 1545, the Academy breaks up. There are some accused of treason. The Inquisition gets involved. Lots of stuff happening. At this point, he also stops talking to Artino. He used to write him gushy, beautiful letters of how wonderful Artino was. In 1552, he was sentenced to life imprisonment by the Inquisition because he translated a Calvinist text, making it available. The Inquisition, of course, was not real thrilled by that. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Interestingly enough, that imprisonment involved house arrest at a paper mill. So he did continue his publication, his writing, his translation. He continued to publish things as well. Years later, towards the end of his life, he was freed by Cosimo de' Medici, and he was no longer under house arrest. And at the very, very end of his life, he has a stroke early on, and he's not publishing or putting things out the last few years. So that's sort of his life in a nutshell. This is the play that I've been looking at, Due Cortigiane. It's a comedy. It is based, as I said before, our friend here is a translator. He's quite familiar with the various Roman and Greek, the humanist works. And this is a version of a play by Plautus, by Titus Marcius Plautus. And it is a version of the play, but the Bacchiades, Bacchides, which is about two sister courtesans, have the same name, which, and thus confusion and comedy ensues. And in this particular version, we have in the original version, the Plautus, we have their name is Bacchidi, or of Bacchus. In this in the 16th century modern version, the names of the sisters, and they are twin sisters, is Isabel. They are both called Isabel. Like I said before, I'm still working on the translation of this. We do have some bits and pieces. Part of the issue I'm having is I have some of the transcription done and some of the bits and pieces of flowery language, but I'm still working on, because it is a comedy, because it is about the language and how it's working, I'm having a hard time being able to communicate that the interplay and the snappiness and really the actual movement of what's talking about. But basically we have the standard, our inamorata has fallen for a courtesan and is paying her and saying nasty things to her because that's the standard. And then we have the two sisters talking to one another in sort of a mercenary manner, because again, that is the standard. That's what makes it. That's the stereotype. That's what we're talking. The character, the stock character. But there's a few moments where they're a little bit less nasty, less catty, and they have some beautiful language involved. But they are talking about the sweet words with which they entrap men. But they also have some give and take back and forth amongst the two sisters that is actually quite nice and not what you would expect, especially having read Artino and other depictions of courtesans. And I think a lot of that has to do with Domenichi and his own views. So we're going to talk about those views. So there's a major discussion going on between the 14th century, between the 1400s and the 1700s about women. It's called the Chorale de Femme, or the question of women. We start with the idea of, are women capable of reason? Are women capable of reason? Yeah. Can they think? Are they real? Are they real people? And that's actually becoming a big shift in the middle of the 16th century. In about 1550, in about 1540, there's some amazing works coming out by women. They're being published. Their words are coming from them rather than whatever men happen to think about them. Interestingly enough, Domenichi has a contribution called the nobleness of women. There is a question again whether that's plagiarized, if he actually did part of the writing, if he really thought that or not. It's a back and forth, but anyway, there's some major works on the question of the nobleness of women, the superiority of women. There's a beautiful work by a woman that comes out a little bit later. But so this is one of the major thoughts on and discussions is it's the beginning of, it doesn't become it isn't feminism. It becomes feminism later, but it is starting to look at women as more than they were. And that's coming out of courtesan culture. That's coming out of courtesans leading these salons, these discussions of philosophy, of courtesans hosting them, of courtesans writing and being published, and really pushing this huge amazing intellectual debate, which I find fascinating. It's really why I have a courtesan persona, because of that, because of what they are bringing to the cultural table. So like I said before, Domenichi's defense of women is questionable whether he wrote it. It's normally assumed that he did, but you'll also hear back and forth scholars getting into whether it was his or he plagiarized it. But he does have some works that are attributed to him, and those are some poetry collections. And what makes them interesting is they are poetry collections of poems by women. Again, her words being spoken rather than people putting words in her mouth. So we have the Rime de diverse signori Neapolitani, which contains the entire all the poems of Chiara Mattiana's verse, and the big one, the one that he is most well known for, the Rime diverse di Alun Nobilissime and Virtuissime Donne, from Knowne of 1559. It is considered to be the first printed anthology of entirely female poetry, almost 1560. But it's huge, it's monumental. There are 53 writers, 53 different women, and their poems in 237 pages. Again, monumental. And his portrayal of like Vittorio Colonna as sort of the same as Bembo, as this male figure for the champion of this. So, but it is part of a larger cultural movement. Between 1550 and 1563, there's a major upsurge in the publication of women's work. That same number, 53. 53 different volumes come out with an average of almost 5 books a year of women's work. After 1563, they drop. it goes from about 5 books a year to 1.5 books a year. It's really no big question why that happens. That happens to be the year that the Council of Trent stops, and we gotta rein all that in. The Inquisition starts. Well, the Inquisition has already been banning books left, right, and center, and making things so that it's difficult. But there is this amazing part of in 13 years where we have huge amounts of women being published, and even more than that, it's love poetry, it's passion, it's outstanding pieces. There is ecclesiastical work, but the ecclesiastical work doesn't come in that surge. I mean, a little bit, bits and pieces, but the big push in ecclesiastical stuff doesn't hit till closer to 1600. So these 13 years where women are publishing gorgeous love sonnets and longer works and outstanding pieces. And again, 53 women, 53 different poets. Yeah, we've got Venice being, the plagues in Venice and the Inquisition blame on the impropriety of Venice society was partially to blame, cracking down a lot on women's publication. That's from the chat. Yes, absolutely. Lots of reasons. We have all kinds of stuff, but it is definitely this culture is starting to shift, and then a reaction to it. Can't have that, cannot have that. Let's see what else is going on in the chat here.
That's been the only thing that was really a commentary.
Alrighty, so but we do have this shift, and Domenichi's part of that. When he's this is the one of the cover title pages for the book. There are several copies available in Italian, available on Google Books. You can just go and get a PDF, download it. It is in it's relatively readable. Well, it is relative. If you read Italian, it is relatively readable. If you do not, it is still to the point where, on the whole, if you're using something like the Google Translate app, which is my favorite, I like, I always love Google Translate, but I absolutely adore the app where you can basically take a picture, you can scan it in, you can take a picture, you can point your phone at it or whatever, and it will translate it right there for you. And it does a pretty good job with this. There are going to be bits and pieces. You're going to have issues like, things like F's and S's, but you can kind of limp your way slowly through it. And that's the issue I'm currently having with the play, is that there are several versions of it available on Archive. Again, I love Archive, and I love the fact that you can go and get full text from Archive. But unfortunately, the transcription in Archive of the Due Cortigiane, because it is a play, it doesn't quite know what to do with the names down the side and the different characters. So you'll get about one English word in every 20. And I'm currently putting that through and doing some transcription. But if you do want to transcribe it directly, it is, at least you're not dealing with something like a 13th century manuscript hand where you just have very little hope, unless you have learned to specifically read this, whereas this is 16th century publication, and it's pretty legible for a beginning scholar. But Domenichi is talking about how his book is devoted to female honor, in order to prove in every possible way the excellence of the female intellect to those who are doubtful about it. So he does seem to be pretty serious in this shift to thinking that women are part of the humanist discussion. I really love to know more about his biography and find out exactly why that shift happened. When it happened. I mean, we have some ideas of when it's happening, but I really want to know why, who he was talking to. I mean, obviously he's talking to some of these female poets. So I want to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations, because it seems like I said before, he was basically worshiping at the feet of Artino previously. He was a big part of this cult of Priapus, basically. And then he shifts and starts defending women. So I don't know. I want to read a little bit more of his work and continue pushing that. But I think it would be absolutely fabulous for somebody to write some of that dialogue. I mean, that would be a fabulous work of fiction. Super interesting stuff. At least I find so. Okay. At this point, are there any questions? Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Go back on a little bit more.
And if your mic isn't working, you can write it in the chat and I will read it to our wonderful teacher.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, if there aren't any particular questions, what I thought I would do is go through and let's see. Any direct interaction with Franco? He probably did. He was more involved with like Vittoria Klowna. He did publish at least one of Franco's pieces. He's involved with more like Gasparo Stampa and a few of the others than with Franco. But he is definitely involving himself with these discussions, with these writings and things like that. Again, because he is in great part under house arrest. But what I thought I'd do is I'd read a few a few poems from our female writers. These are coming out of Women Poets of the Italian Renaissance, Courtly Ladies and Courtesans, edited by Laura Anna Startoni, translated by Laura Anna Startoni and Maria Prentice Lilly. I highly recommend this one as well as Shining Eyes. They're both amazing books full of female poetry from the 16th century and wonderful translations. And if you get Shining Eyes, it even better, it has a CD. Yes, I will put the books in chat in just a second. Even better, oh yeah, there's a CD where you can listen to the work in Italian and then the translation as well. And just listening to them is fabulous. I will be talking a little bit more later on about a lot of the stuff out of Shining Eyes and a few of those particular poems in the class later on today, which is on 16th century love poetry. But you know, any chance to read a few more. So this one is. This is Barbara Bentivolio Strozzi Torelli, 1533. So this is an earlier piece that is republished, and quite a few of the work in his anthology is republication that was either written earlier and not published, or published previously and then added. But this is quenched in the torch of love, his dart is broken, as are his quiver, bow, and all his power. Since cruel death has stricken down the tree beneath whose shade I used to sleep in peace. Ah, why can I not enter in with him? Enter in with him in the early grave where destiny has laid him, to whom but barely 13 days ago love grafted me before the monstrous blow. I wish that with my ardor I could melt that icy cold, and moisten with my tears his dust, and so remold him to new life. And then with courage and with boldness, show this miracle to him who snapped our bond and say, see, heartless beast, what love can do. This one's written after her husband dies. Obviously, that's what's going on there. This one is Chiara Matriani, and as I said before, Domenichi is writing one of his first publications of women's poetry is all of her work. It's everything she had written that we have available extant is in that book. He does republish several of those as well, but this one is is one of those. I am a wild deer in the shady wood, with a sharp arrow driven through my heart. I flee, alas, that which would end my pain, and seek him who destroys me bit by bit. And like a bird that feels among her feathers a lighted fire, which makes her fly away from her beloved nest, the heat goes with her, and all the time her winged beats fan the flame. So I, among these leaves in summer air, flying on high with wings of strong desire, attempt to quench the flame I carry with me. But howsoever much from bank to bank I go to flee my ill with fierce assault, I gain a long death for my little life. So there's some absolutely beautiful short poems, and I can't recommend enough reading those. Let me try to get this typed out in the chat. Oh, you have Women Poets of the Italian Renaissance. Perfectly, thank you. Shining Eyes, Cruel Fortune is the other one that I really, really like. And again, the biggest bit coming out of this is a lot of these women are, and a huge amount of them are part of the salon culture. They're hosting these ideas. They're pushing these ideas. And they're finally starting to have their own words. And I love that. I love the fact that we can look in the poetry and a little bit in some of the plays and start to see the turns of phrase they're using. And I think that's, if we study the poetry, kind of using some of those turns of phrase, things like the sharp arrow driven through my heart, I flee. We have a lot of fabulous imagery that's really outstanding to be able to use with our personas as we study a little bit more of those and see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's poetry. It's a little flowery, but you want a few turns of phrase that are a little flowery. They make for fun. They make for more verisimilitude to make it a little bit more exciting, a little bit more of those special moments where you can go and say, this is how they might have felt. This is how they might have communicated. And it's very, 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 very late in period that we have some of these words, but we do have some, and I think they're not to be missed. So I'm going to suggest everybody read more poetry. Okay, any other questions? And thank you so much for putting those books up in the chat. I appreciate it so very much. All right, I think I've probably droned on about as much as I'm going to be able to drone on this morning.
This has been really fascinating.
Well, thank you. And I think I probably should have put this one later in the day when my brain was more engaged. But again, I just love the fact that we start to see some shifts. We can actually see them in one particular guy, seeing his shift and change in dealing with these courtesans and dealing with these particular words and having discussions in philosophy, and see how that, it is becoming, it's shifting views. So
is it like a sudden change, or
it is within the Ortani ends in 1545, and he's publishing he's publishing the rhyme by 1559, and his defense of women is even earlier. So it's not like one day one thing, one day the next day a total change, but it is within like a 5 to 8 year period. Just like the cultural shift is occurring between 1550 and 1563, where we're starting to have so much more publication coming. So those are fascinating years. I mean, in great part of that is just the huge amount of how vibrant and how violent and how gigantic the shifts in everything are, of, who's running the country. Are we French now? Are we Italian? Who owns Milan? There's so much going on, both in the politically as well as culturally, and it creates some interesting moments.
Maybe he had more exposure. This is from chat. Being a student of one who had very misogynistic views, he might not have had direct exposure to female writers until later that opened his eyes.
Absolutely, and I think that's a big part of it, which is why I'd really like to see, there's so much there that to go dig through and look at correspondences and see who was talking to. I want to know. There hasn't been a huge, there's been some interesting research that has come out in the past. Between 2015 and 2018, there were several research papers that are coming out. But as far as I haven't seen any major work about his correspondence or anything else. So it's definitely there to be looked at. So bits and pieces, but what the real answer is, I don't know yet. I don't think it has. Nobody's done that work yet. So fun stuff to go look at.
If I had to hazard a guess based on my life experience in human behavior, it would be that something happened to a woman he cared about.
Probably.
Because I have never seen anything else make a man change his views and break with a circle of friends so cleanly, and be like, no, yeah, I'm gonna do this other thing. So that would be my guess. But
yeah, and it's possible. I mean, because there are these amazingly strong women, out of courtesan culture, who are out there, who are talking, who are talking and corresponding. But also, there's a lot of them we don't hear their words. We don't know who they are. So it could be any number of things. And I want to know what's going on at that paper mill. I want to know who's around. I want to know who his new friends are. So yeah. But again, takeaway for me is always read more poetry.
Well, poetry was the major form of literature at this time. People weren't writing novels.
No. But
and some of the collections of what appear to us to be short stories were actually written in verse.
Yes, they're definitely being written that way. There's a reason my name is Praxilla, actually. I'm named after Praxilla of Sicyon, who was known as one of the great ancient Greek poets. Almost nothing she wrote survives. She does have an idiom that is represented by her, but not much of her stuff survives. But she's got everything from odes to drinking songs. So poetry is one of my major passions. So here you guys go read more, because it's cool and it's important, especially at this particular cultural moment.
And try writing some.
Trying writing some is also important. Yeah.
I was actually going to say, when you were talking about the cultural upheaval and the violence that came with the changes in how society viewed women and different groups of people, that it's a useful thing for students of history living in modern times to remember that that's usually a side effect of great cultural change.
Great cultural change brings amazing art. It really does. Yeah, it's the moment for it.
I just had a question. You mentioned sort of in passing that he had gotten in trouble for translating some Calvinist work.
Yes.
And I know that that was like I've done a teeny bit of research on Vittoria Colonna, and I know that she was kind of like I wouldn't say Calvinist, but there was a period where she was kind of Calvinist adjacent because because she was sort of interested in this larger project of religious reform. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that a little bit and
I
like
really
what's
can't.
going on.
I don't know enough. It's bits and pieces as I work through it. Like I said, I love the Venetian printing industry, but my major focus has been on pattern books for lace and embroidery. So I'm not as up on my philosophy as I should be. Working into it, but like I said, 1,300 publishers. They've got an amazing output. There's
Yeah,
so much knowledge being just thrown everywhere right at that point.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty, any other questions? Then I think we are done because I'm gonna go grab some eggs so that I can start filling them with rose water for my next class. If anybody's interested in learning how to throw rose water bombs of eggshells at their friends, that's what's coming up next.
Sounds good. It's on
I
my
am interested.
agenda.
I do have a question for you, actually. Are you free Friday during the day at all? And would you be interested in recording a podcast episode on the birth of, or on this point in publishing and women being published for the first time?
Sure, I could do that.
Okay. I'm doing like podcast interviews all day long. So I will send you the link where I don't think we're connected on Facebook. So I will send you a friend request and we'll hash this out.
Okay, wonderful.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much, and I will be back for the eggs.
All right, awesome.